Hey guys, hello and welcome to my channel. This is Kshitij, and on this channel we talk about robotics, research and academia. In today's video, we'll be talking about 15 things that you should do as a fresh PhD student, right? So in your first year of PhD, what are some of the things that you should get sorted? So as you can see on my screen, I have a to-do list in front of me, which has 15 checkpoints. They are arranged in no particular order, but I have found that most of these things, if you sort out in your first year already, they help you and make sure you get a smooth ride from then on. So let's take a quick look. So number one is identifying the Zen times of the day. So this is a link to another YouTube video that we have done already, which you'll also be seeing in the I button above now, which talks about your most productive times of the day and identifying the aspects that help you stay productive for those times, right? So it could be your work environment, right, mindset, and a whole bunch of other things that we've talked about in that video. So identify yourself and identify what works for you and what doesn't. So that's number one, the Zen modes of the day. Number two is to get to know your professor and your group. So by that I mean, look up the courses that your professor offers in the university. Those are typically from their area of expertise, and you may benefit from taking those courses as well, or at least auditing them. Get to know the group, your fellow peers who are in the group, and get to know their area of expertise or their areas of interest, because sometimes you could collaborate within your group and distribute the workload. Also, something that you could do, which is a bit optional but a good practice to get familiar with what the group trend has been, look up the papers published by the group, typically by your professor as the group leader, in the past couple of years to identify the trend towards which the work has been done and the momentum is being built, right? So you could try and identify if that is something that you could reap the benefits from as well. Number three, know the sister department and the campus facilities. By sister department, I mean, so if you're part of a particular department, there are other departments on campus. Identify what is it that they do, what facilities do they have. For instance, some department might offer you a fab lab, so you could get your fabrication needs sorted there. Some departments might be focused on electronics, some might be focused on mechanical engineering, and a whole bunch of other areas of expertise. So for instance, if you're in robotics, it's a multidisciplinary research area. So you might need to interface with people from computer science, from automation, from electrical, and so on and so forth. So identifying what sister departments you have around you, where they're located, who's the professor, what is the group doing, helps you a lot in establishing interdepartmental collaborations. Also, identifying campus facilities. So not only identifying things like fab labs and other research groups, by that I also mean identifying sports facilities, parks, anything and everything else that you think would be helpful for your mental and physical well-being. Get to know all of them. Basically things like sports clubs, sports activities, leisure activities, and so on. Number four, identifying the graduation requirements. This is something that I find is often overlooked until it's too late, right? So by that I mean, already try and understand what are the minimum requirements from your university. So sometimes there are a certain number of conference papers and journal papers that are kept as a requirement. There's often a requirement for the number of credits you take. Sometimes there might even be a requirement for the terms and tenures in which you finish the courses. There might be an optional criteria for you to go overseas for an internship or an exchange program or things like that. So identify all of those that you need to fulfill as a sort of administrative load for you to graduate, right? So of course you'll be doing your research work as well, but unless you meet these minimum requirements, you will get into trouble later on. So sort them out in the beginning. Next up, plan your coursework. So once you've identified how many credits you need to identify the kind of courses that would benefit your research that you're trying to undertake. For that, you could not only look up the professors and speak to previous students if you have access to them, look up the previous syllabus of the course and so on. But you could also understand if the tenures of the courses, so you could plan your research around it, because when you're doing courses and you're trying to do research at the same time, it gets quite difficult trying to balance both at the same time, right? So you have to plan your timetable accordingly. And we have already done a video on how to plan everything. So I'll link it in the I button as well. So you basically need to plan everything out based on in which term are you going to take which course, and if you want to go for an exchange overseas and you want to be sure that your credits are transferable and so on and so forth, right? So those things need to be sorted as well. Then if you want to be a TA or a RA or undertake an internship, right? So sometimes it might give you some extra cash as well, and who doesn't like extra cash on the side? So it adds on to your stipend that you will get automatically as a part of your PhD. So if you want to do that, again, it requires planning, right? So with which professor, in which term, which course are you going to be a TA or RA? It doesn't necessarily have to be your own supervisor. Maybe there is some professor who's offering a course which you are an expert of, and you can offer to be a TA in that course because you already are an expert. If not, you probably see some benefits of being a TA in that course. Maybe you can get to network. Maybe there is something in that course that benefits you. So you could set up connections that way and, identify who you're going to reach out to when you want to get a TA or RA position. The same thing applies for an internship, right? So either you could be a summer intern in some university or academic setting, or you could go to an industrial setting and get a flavor of, 2-3 months or whatever of a summer internship in some industrial setting. So identify all of these things, where you want to go, how long is it going to be, when is it going to be, so that you can plan out your degree from then on. Next up is identifying top conferences and journals. So it's not just identifying the names, it's also identifying their timelines. So for conferences, typically they are around the same time year after year, right? So if you get the hang of it, when are the conferences that you're aiming for, you can pace yourself accordingly. Journals typically don't really have a deadline, but if you're applying for some special issues of a journal, they have a call out at a particular time, which is sort of hard to predict. But even if you know how long does the publication cycle take for the journal from the first submission till the final acceptance, that might help you to pace yourself, right? Because if a journal takes quite a bit of time, the odds are if things go sideways, you'll have to come up with a plan B real quick, which requires a lot of planning and keeping margin for error. So knowing these kind of things ahead of time will help you plan properly. Next up is identifying top scholars. By top scholars, I mean people and peers who are at the same rank as you are. So fellow PhD students from different universities, could be seniors like postdocs, senior postdocs and research associates of that level, or could even be professors. Some people who do work in the area that you're interested in, and some professors, with whom you aspire to be able to work in the future. So identify them and, bookmark them or track whatever it is that they're doing. So keep up with the trends, especially for the people that you really look up to. Then Latex is another essential tool that is quite important, at least for us in robotics and computer science community. We use Latex quite a lot to write the manuscripts for submission, both conferences and journals, right? So almost all publication venues, they offer you a template for Latex that you could then, start populating and adding your content in, and then you submit it accordingly. So they have all the margins set out for you, logos and all the other sort of information is already set up for you. And you just fill in your own introduction, abstract, and the other sections, and then you submit the PDF, right? So get familiar with LaTeX and start playing around with mock templates. And mock templates you could prepare for presentations, because sure, you're going to need presentations. You could prepare some dummy manuscripts because you've identified the top conferences already. So most likely you're going to go for them. So just set up some dummy manuscripts for them so that it will save you time later and you could make clones of them. Also identify how you're going to set up LaTeX, right? So LaTeX works in one of two ways. One is offline version where you install the software on your PC and compile it and do the things there. And the other version is this tool called Overleaf, where everything happens online and you could add collaborators and a whole bunch of things like that. So it's like a collaborative development in case if you have collaborators for your manuscript. So identify all of these things and start getting familiar with LaTeX and start playing around with it. Next is setting up literature review database. So this is again another link, and we have already gone through on how to prepare, plan, and manage your database. So I'll not talk about this in length here, but you should start setting things up, because as a researcher, I'm expecting you to read quite a lot of papers, and things will start falling out of hand if you don't have a proper database management system at hand, because by the end of your research, you probably have read something like 100 to 300 something papers, and you probably won't remember it all. It's quite difficult at the end of the day. So that's why having a proper database and being able to manage and sort and filter things out is quite essential. So getting familiar with that is something that you should look out for. Then learning administrative procedures. So for example, if you're doing some research which would require you to procure some hardware, so how does that work? Do you go through a technician? Is there somebody in the university that approves the request? How things work out? So that's important to know. Another thing is you might want to be hiring some interns to get some work done. So summer interns, winter interns, or whatever. So how does that work? Where do you apply? How do they come and connect with you? Who approves them? How does the admin procedure work for that? Leave of absence. So sometimes you might get some paid leaves. Anything above that, you probably have to get permissions from your supervisor, plan with HR and whatnot. So how does that work? And in case if you're getting funding from a particular grant, which either you wrote or was written by a professor already, and you're just a part of the grant and getting funding from it, it's important for you to familiarize yourself with the deliverables and any admin responsibilities you have towards the project as a part of the project. Next, you should sign up for professional communities. So professional associations, for example, in my domain are something like IEEE and ACM, which not only gives members some discounts when you're submitting papers and registering for attending the conferences and stuff. There are also publications and manuscripts which are subscription only. So if you are a subscriber, you get access to them. So it's either you or the university that needs to have subscribed to that journal or proceedings of a conference. Otherwise, you don't have access to that. So it's essential that you start finding out what associations are these and talk to your professor, which one of them are more relevant to you and how you can sign up for them. Sort out the access to the relevant softwares and licenses that you would need, because, for example, if you're a student at a university, typically the university would help you get the university license and student licenses and things like that. So work it out with your professor. Sometimes it's beneficial to have a group level license, so many people can benefit from it. Sometimes it's an individual license, but as a student, you should go through the university so that you get reimbursed and whatnot. So understand how all of these things work and get all your software set up so that when it comes to research, you can get to work right away. LinkedIn is another underrated tool that, for example, when I was starting out my PhD, I had an account, but I didn't quite know how to go about it. But now in your generation, it's very important that you are active on LinkedIn and actively publishing your research as it progresses. Of course, you have to decide what you're comfortable with posting and what you want to keep confidential until you get a paper out. But you could post things like midway progress kind of checkpoints. I was doing this yesterday, I came this far, this is how I failed, this is how I succeeded, this is what I did and whatnot. So people are kind of aware of what you're doing and you start to build a community around that. At the same time, use it to network with peers, right? So the top scholars that I told you to identify, try and send out connections with personalized messages to them, connect with them, DM them, chat with them. Remember, professors are busy, so not every professor is going to be able to reply to you, but it doesn't hurt to try. Keep it short, keep it concise, but build your network. So LinkedIn is going to be your best friend. Start networking, start building your community already. Also, start look out for other relevant channels. For example, Twitter is something that the machine learning community uses quite a lot. So identify in what kind of social channels is your community active in. So LinkedIn is definitely going to be one, but there might be others too. So for instance, Twitter, there is Meetup. Meetup is a website. You could sign up here, which organizes like gatherings. Of course, not in the time of COVID, but in other times. You could attend some local meetups and network with people in in-person events. There would be some domain-specific mailing list that you could sign up for. So typically in mailing list, the ones that I'm subscribed to, they talk about upcoming calls for conference papers or journal papers, for special issues, any open positions or anything relevant to research, any software releases and so on and so forth. So these kind of information are very good for you, both from your career perspective and for staying abreast with what's happening in your community, right? So these are the top 15 things that I wish I knew back when I was started, but now I'm trying to give it to you guys so that you are sure you've signed up for your PhD and you're not kind of staring at the stars trying to figure out what to do next. So hopefully these would clarify the things for you and keep striking them off in the to-do list. And if there is anything else that you would recommend doing other than these things, feel free to put that down in the comment section below, and share it with the community so that the others can learn from it as well. I hope you found this relevant. Be sure to like and share this video with your fellow researchers and subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when the next video goes live. All right, thank you and have a nice day.